Hello and welcome back to the worst Warmachine channel on the internet. I'm Malorian and it's time for another Malorian Weekly. Now, what we're going to be talking about today is going to be power blame. Now, I'm sure a lot of people out there are like, oh, there goes Malorian with his catchy titles. But I really didn't know a better way to put this. The way that we're actually going to be looking at this today is really looking at the power level of Warmachine and really seeing where's the blame and how it should be handled. Now, in the last video, we basically looked at fixing CID. CID basically being Warmachine's process by Privateer Press to be evaluating the rules of the models that they're either producing or re-looking at and the way they could be doing that better. Now, are they going to actually be going through with that? Yeah, you bet they will, because Hungerford still owes me for making Buccaneers 7 points. Now, otherwise, what we really said there was a lot of finger pointing at Privateer Press saying, this is your way of controlling the power level, and this is how you need to fix it. There were some fingers going back as well, but by looking at that video, that really makes you feel that Privateer Press is the one that's going to be really responsible and accountable for this power level management of the game. Now, before we go too much forward, let's really talk about what this power level even means. What am I even talking about? Well, we're playing in a competitive game. And in a competitive game, that's going to mean that from our options, if we want to be beating somebody else, there's going to be some better options and there's going to be some not as good options. If I look here on my little wall of things, there's going to be my Gaspy 4s, and then there's going to be things like my trencher chain guns, which I haven't even bothered to paint yet, for reasons. Now, because of this really means then that there'll be kind of like a scale and a gradient of all these different choices and the different power levels around them. This is not just for models, but also for things like factions and casters and themes and blah, blah, blah. Basically, any way you can cut this pie, you'll need to go and actually do a gradient to see these different power levels. And you see these things happen on the forums all the time. You'll see those little charts where, you know, there's the S tier and the A, B, C, D and the F tier and all that stuff. And people give their feelings on that, and we could talk about how it's difficult to do these or things like that, but that's not really the focus of what this video is going to be about. I really want to talk about who's to blame for where the power level is and what needs to be done about it. Now, I guess the really obvious way to start with this conversation is say, well, clearly, Malorian, it's going to be Privateer Press. They're the ones that actually came up with the rules, and they're the ones that are controlling this, so it's really going to be their fault. Now, there's some other things that we really want to think of when coming into this. I mean, we could be thinking about things like with that CID process, where maybe they're getting bad input, and so even if they want to make things right, then they're going to be having their own problems, trying to say like, well, come on, all these people screaming on the CID said we should do this, and we did it. How are we supposed to know that they were just lying because they're from that faction and trying to make it better, or weren't in that faction and trying to be making it worse? Well, there's also the idea of why are they doing this? You know, one thing to keep in mind is, why does Privateer Press even want to have an evenly powered game? I mean, sure, you could say that if Warmachine was a perfectly balanced game, it would just be a good game, and then people would be coming to play it, and that sounds good, but they also have to sell models, and that means that when they put things out there, they have to go and make them interesting, they have to make them good, and that puts them in a very awkward spot, because if Gaspy 4 is not good, and the trencher chain gun is amazing, well, then people aren't going out there and buying this new product. Why did they even make this new product? People just go back and find, you know, old models like these that they can just go and try and buy off people that left the game. The secondary market now becomes more important than what's newly coming off their conveyor belts. And that's financially is a problem. Now, some of the things I'm going to be doing in this video is comparing to how it's done here in Warmachine to how it's done in Magic the Gathering. For those who don't know, Magic the Gathering is another game that I very much enjoy, particularly Commander. And even though I'm not going to make this a Magic the Gathering video or anything, there's definitely some big comparisons to be looking at. In the past, for example, the policy of Wizards of the Coast that make Magic the Gathering has been to, as much as possible, trying to come up with things that are balanced. You know, they might put out sometimes things are a little bit too strong or things are a little bit too weak, but overall their policy is that they want the game to be balanced. They don't want to have real power creep. Power creep really just being that if I release something that beats the last thing, you're going to want to buy that. And then if the next thing's more powerful, you're going to want to buy that, and so on and so on and so on. And that's just kind of unhealthy for the game in general, because that really leads to models that are useless and you might just throw them in the garbage type thing, which is not really where you want to be at, because then people say, why would I even buy these things when in a couple of years I'm not going to be using it anymore? So that's something else to be keeping in mind. Recently, however, that policy has changed. That policy has now changed to be pushing their releases as much as possible. In fact, kind of like the saying they're going with is that as you as a designer, if you haven't had something banned, you're not trying. Really meaning that they want things to be pushed. Maybe not so much so it's so extreme, but just enough that's flashy and interesting and it's grabbing people's attention. Because one, it's going to be selling product, which is really what they're trying to do. And two, if it's flashy and new and different and interesting, well, then it's flashy, new, and different and interesting, and players are going to enjoy this. It's not just like, oh, we have another model with a long gun. It's now a trencher long gun instead of a long gun. You know, it's something more flashy, more different. You know, all of a sudden, it's not just like, oh, we're wearing hats and have long guns. Now we have, you know, we have tough, and we're able to pick what column we're going after and stuff like that. Oh, wait, I'm relating this to Warmachine already. But what we're trying to really say there is that their philosophy has changed to be doing that. And what I really got to thinking is maybe that's what Privateer Press is doing as well. You know, one of the biggest sayings they've been saying is not, if you haven't got something banned, you're not trying, because that doesn't get seen here, right? You never will see Gaspy 4 just banned and you can't use it anymore. We're not looking at something like Magic the Gathering that has thousands and thousands and thousands of cards. We're into the hundreds of options, and most of these things are very core choices that you can't just ban and get rid of. However, what the saying has been here is more so hashtag design space, looking for spots you could be making things different in ways that you've never explored before. You know, all of a sudden the idea of like, well, what if we have battle engine warcasters? What if we have these archons, these big super solos? What if we're having these like super juniors? What if we're doing this? What if we're doing that? What if you're summoning? You know, something new and different, and kind of pushing the envelope, at least in terms of design, and then whether it's accidental or not, pushing things in the level of power, because obviously things that are like, you know, Gaspy 4 super juniors going out there are going to be powerful. Now, I can't speak whether Privateer Press is also trying to be doing that and pushing things to the point where it's overly powerful, because they have not said anything to that effect. All we can say is really that it would be in their benefit to do so, because they would sell more models. And then at the same time, we have seen examples of that. Now, you can't really say that for everything though, right? If you look across of all the different releases Privateer Press is being putting out, sure, some of them are A+ out of the park things like Gaspy 4, but you've had your other stuff too. Like if you especially look at all these different RideQuest things coming over, sure, some of them are interesting and neat, but they're not really all making them. And in fact, a lot of the ones are never really taken unless it's something janky and silly. They're kind of more in that bottom option of you're not really going to see it in competitive play. So, okay, that'd be good to know that they're not pushing everything. But I think something else we should really address right now is that, like before, all my fingers have been pointing at Privateer Press. These are their policies. These are the things that they're doing. And there's that reason for it. It's their game. They're the ones that's actually leading it. But there's also something else that I noticed as well. You know, just like in that comparison from Warmachine to Magic the Gathering, where the production policy and the dev policy of what they're making going forward seems to be aligning and is kind of interesting in that way. Well, there's also something else that when you compare Warmachine to Magic the Gathering, there's another big difference as well. Now, when it comes to Magic the Gathering, there are huge different power levels, especially with Commander. And these things are very, very pushed forward because it's not always now just something of I'm going to a tournament and I'm trying to win. It's also really pushing here, especially in Commander, which is a multiplayer game, that we want this to be more enjoyable. Even if it's just like a one-on-one type thing, there is your regular type of games where I want to sit down there, we're going to have a whatever time game and have fun. And then there's like, well, what if we push the power level higher and higher and higher? And to try and explain that power level, you can have something where you can have somebody win on like turn 2, turn 3, and you've barely done anything whatsoever. And you can say that, oh, that's that card game, there's flaws in there, they've made their own mistakes, but you can almost say the same thing on Warmachine as well, where you can go up there and do like your first turn advance, and then on turn 2, you're going to be killed by maybe a Sloan assassination, or maybe an Agathon assassination, whatever it is. You know, it's a big alpha, you're hit and you're killed. Now, so each of these things exists on each side. However, on the Warmachine side, we don't seem to really ever do anything about it. We all understand that these things are powerful. We'll talk about it, how these are in the tournament meta, but that's really it. It's just a collective understanding that these things are powerful. On the Magic side, there is a real effort made to really break up what these power levels are in order to make things more fair. So a very big one, a very big distinction on that side is whether it's CEDH or just EDH. Is it the competitive version or if it's not? The idea being that all these people that want to go super fast and win very quickly, those are CEDH, and they should be playing against each other because they're playing on that same level. Everybody else is regular Commander, and that's going to be this other group. Again, trying to do the groupings to make sure that you have a more enjoyable game. And even past that, right? They even have things where they have 10-point scales. And so depending on how your deck has synergies and how quickly it's trying to win and all those types of things will determine generally where you scale on 1 to 10. And even then, when you walk into a game, the understanding is you're supposed to ask your opponent, okay, what type of power levels are we all doing? Okay, we're all about 6 and 7s. All right, let's make sure we all have a deck about that, because if somebody pulls out their 10, they're just going to win and you're wasting everybody's time. And like I said, you don't see that in Warmachine. You don't have those conversations, right? You don't walk into a game and say like, oh, what is the, on a 1 to 10, what's the power level of your list, right? You might ask something like, okay, are you a new player? And then if they're like brand new, then you're going to tone things down. But otherwise, pretty much every game is like full steam ahead, let's go. And that's a problem. That's a real problem. One of the big things that is killing things for Warmachine, and I had talked about this before, and I talked about the 5 most frustrating things for me about Warmachine, is just how unforgiving this game is. And much like how in that Magic game, you can go in and turn 2, turn 3, the person won is like, well, there you go. I'm glad I drove all the way down to the store for that. Well, on the flip side, it's the same thing there, where you can walk in and you get crushed by whatever assassination or super fast alpha, and especially if it's in a way where you can't interact with it, maybe like a range assassination, magical assassination, long threat, melee, whatever it is, you are helpless, you got hit by this, and even though maybe you can take some learnings from that for next time, the game's over, the game's done, and now you're kind of waiting for the other games to end. You might be in a spot where like, okay, I learned what I did wrong, but my list is the way it is, or maybe there's nothing I can really do based on this terrain. So if I was to re-rack against my opponent, I'm going to see the same result. So I don't even want to play against you again, you know, like, or maybe there's just nothing I can do. You're just a very experienced player with a good list, and I made some silly lists that I brought just to have fun, and we're just not going to have fun playing against each other. So these feel bads lead to people not enjoying the game, and when they don't enjoy the game, they don't come back to play the game. So on one side, you have it so that the people playing the game are self-regulating to make sure that everybody has a good time. And on the other side, which is unfortunately the Warmachine side, we are not doing that whatsoever. So in both cases, the people who make the game, whether it's Wizards of the Coast or Privateer Press, they have their own responsibilities. They're not out of this. They have some part of the pie. And, you know, even though it's in their own best interest to have a relatively balanced game, it's also very much in their interest to be always slightly pushing the power level, or at least making things more interesting and different in a way that probably allows competitive players to get that advantage that is now making it so that that power level is going up because they need to make that money. So they're both in the same area. However, like we just said there, we're not seeing that for ourselves. And it's we as the players and the community that is really failing ourselves in this. You know, whenever you see these things going out and saying, hey, everybody rate what's the best factions, everybody rate what are the best casters, nothing's really done about it. I mean, I guess we could say now with the release of Warmachine, where things are going on to a epic list, and so these things you're supposed to stay away from unless you're both in the same page type thing. The big thing is that we don't do anything with that data. We don't come in here and say like, oh, we're going to be playing S tier casters. Okay, let me pull out my S tier list. Oh, we're going to be having fun and playing F casters? All right, let me pull out my F list. That's not the way that the system works. The way the system works is you come in with your two lists, and that's really it. And that's probably a problem. Now, what can we do about it? What's the way forward? Well, the first thing is for us to understand that this is an issue. Again, so many times, if I go out there and I tell people you need to self-regulate to make this game thrive, they're like, no, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to punch you in the face until you learn. And that's great. That's why you see new players with black eyes walking away. And that's not what we want to have happen here. So if we can all realize that this is a problem, the next step is for us to address it. Maybe we need to change our understanding. Maybe what we need to do as players is to come in and not just have those two lists, but hey, I got this phone full of all these lists on War Room. Maybe I should start looking at those and realizing what are the different power levels on here. Are these ones that are designed just to kill you right away with no interaction? Well, maybe I should only be playing those if I'm up against somebody else who is aware of this, who's at that competitive level. Maybe I should be walking in with not just such a primary goal of winning the game, but also with the goal of enjoying the game, so that it's now in my advantage, in my interest, to be having that conversation of what type of game are we going to play? Are we both competitive players and we're going to bring out our best and just try and beat each other? Okay, that's awesome. Or are you somebody looking for more, a little bit of a fun? Are you looking for something that's, okay, not the silliest of the silly, but somewhere in between? You know, it's now in our interest to have that conversation. And until you start seeing that, that's going to be a real problem. So much of our community is based around tournament play and go, go, go and push, push, push. And I think that's really starting to hurt us. And I mean, obviously now we can't really be playing anyways during the pandemic times, but I think using this time that we have right now, when things are going to be kicking off again, and we're hopefully going to be bringing back our old players and grabbing new players, it is very much going to be something we should be thinking about as a community, about how we can be regulating our own power level. So there you have it. Please talk down below whether you think I'm right about this. Are we really to blame for this power level? Is this something that we have to be regulating ourselves? Or is Malorian wrong as usual? And this is just something that Privateer Press has to be managing better. So there you have it. Thanks for watching. Post down below. And otherwise, we'll catch you later. Bye.